Hey guys, this is video 2 in looking at intelligence that we will not be in class on Monday to cover. So we ended the last video talking about the intelligence test, how it was designed, and some of the items on the test. One of the things we need to look at, though, are some downfalls of the test. As this is supposed to be measuring intellectual functioning, a lot of people are against the test because they feel you had to have had some academic skills or how your environment was can shape how well you show on the test. Because if you don't know the 7 continents in the world, then you can't answer that on the test. Therefore, we do see differences with different societal issues in regards to groups of people's IQ scores. And here's some of the things we found. That lower class US children, so children who are in poverty or working class, tend to score 10 to 15 points lower than middle to upper class children on the IQ test. And again, that makes sense because we're asking you vocabulary questions, we're asking you knowledge questions. If your parents haven't exposed you to those things, or you haven't learned those things in your school, you're going to score lower on the test. Asian American children tend to outscore the other groups. European Americans tend to be second, but then African Americans and Latina or Latino Americans scoring fourth. There could be some cultural differences there that recognizes this difference in scoring. Asian American families tend to focus very strongly on education, and they tend to push their children in education beyond what the school requires. Latina and Latino children, of course, they're going to score lower if they take the test in English. The test is offered in other languages, but the psychologist giving the test has to be able to speak that language and understand that language. So these are some of the cultural differences we see in the test. Because of these cultural differences, a lot of people want the test to be redesigned and become a cultural free test, being a test that doesn't measure things that you would have to learn in your environment, because it puts the middle class and upper class in an advantage over other people to do well on the test just because of their life experiences. So what would a cultural free test look like? Well, there's a couple that are out there. Cattell's Cultural Fair Intelligence Test, Goodenough's Draw a Person Test. On the next slide, I will actually show you what we would look for in a cultural test. This is an example from Cattell's Cultural Free Test. So in the first example, the series example, you are supposed to tell what object comes next. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Sit there and tell yourself what object comes next. The correct answer is 1. The next, in the matrices, you're supposed to tell what's in that bottom right block. And in the matrices, give yourself a second, look 1 through 5, and choose your answer. The correct answer is 1. These are similar items that we see in the performance IQ, and taking out the verbal. I do think the verbal can be unfair to different cultures, as it is geared towards middle and upper class and European Americans. However, you also need to look at the opposite side of the coin. Is our ability to speak and express our intelligence important in evaluating intelligence? If you think yes, then you would not want them to lose the verbal part of the test. The test is not perfect. Remember, it's measuring academic ability to succeed in an academic setting. People put too much weight on an IQ score. You need to realize that certain people are not going to do as well on the IQ test, also because of other limitations. For instance, myself, I do really well on the verbal portion of the Wechsler scale, but I tend to perform poorly on the performance portion. And the reason for that has nothing to do with my intelligence. It has to do with that I told you there's a subtest where you have to take blocks and you have to flip them around and make the design that the person is showing you in a certain time limit. Well, I have my disability in my hands, so turning blocks over are going to be more difficult for me. I'm going to drop them, things like that. Therefore, I don't make the image within the time limit. Some of the other items in the performance, you are writing. Well, I write slower because of my disability, so I'm not going to perform even though I cognitively know what I need to do and can think about it quickly. So those kind of things have to be accounted for when you write an IQ report. For instance, my report says her full scale IQ is lower than what we believe it truly is because her performance IQ is low due to a physical disability. We would suggest that you focus mainly on her verbal IQ as this is more accurate of her intelligence. So the person given the IQ test can put disclaimers in there like that. They can explain to you your strengths and weaknesses, which are helpful. The IQ score itself is just a number. What are the gender differences? Girls tend to outperform boys in the verbal ability. Boys tend to do better in the performance IQ. However, you see more variation within group than between groups. What that means is you're going to see more variation. You're going to see a wider range of scores when looking at all the girls in the girls group, their individual scores, than you are when you're looking at their average score compared to the boys' average score. So we're all different. We all have varying abilities and intelligence, and these gender differences are there but very small. And then the question you should ask yourself, are these gender differences due to gender roles that we are teaching our kids at a young age in our society? We tend to encourage girls to be more verbal, to do more things like read and be involved in English and literature. We encourage boys to be more visual spatial and be focused more on math. So could that be why they score differently on the intelligence test? All right, nature and nurture and intelligence. How much is it ingrained in you? How much of it is from your environment? The way we study this is through kinship studies. Kinship studies can occur in multiple different ways. The best grouped study of kinship studies is identical twins. Identical twins, also known as monozygotic twins, meaning they come from the same egg and sperm, have the exact same DNA. So any difference between them in their ability is due to environment, especially when they've been reared apart. We can know for sure what is genetic, what is environmental. Another important kinship is to look at the correlations between fraternal twins, siblings, and their parents and their children. How closely related are parents and child's IQ scores or siblings' IQ scores? The more related they are, the more support for a genetic component. The correlations get weaker between cousins because there's less genetic material, and we found only weak correlations between children and their foster parents, which tell us that there is a strong genetic component to intelligence. So how strong? Identical twins reared together, so they have the exact same DNA, and they've had very similar environments. Their IQ scores correlate about 0.85%, close to 0.990%, which means, looking at that, they're about 90%, 85% correlated. But they've had very similar environments and they have the same DNA. The interesting one to look at is actually the next one. Identical twins reared apart. If you look there, about 70% of their DNA is the same or correlates. Therefore, that tells us that a lot of it is genetic, but is some environmental as well. So what do we take from all this? Like I said, we've already talked about twin studies, so I'm not going to go over that again. Another way to do it is adoption studies. So we look at the IQ score of adopted children. We also give an IQ score to their biological parent, and we do their adoptive parent. If the child's IQ score is closer to their biological parent than their adoptive parent, then that tells us that IQ has a high genetic component. If it's closer to their adoptive parent, then that tells us their IQ score is more an environmental component. What has all this research shown? It has shown that about between 40 and 60% of our intelligence is heredity, which means that about half of our IQ score can be explained by our genetics, the other half by how we were raised. So we can actually help our child's intelligence and help them do better in school, especially if we give them an enriched learning environment ages 0 to 5. Pick up with me in the next video to finish the material.